The black box was still warm when I pulled it out of the evidence tub. Warm like a living thing. Not sat in the sun on deck warm. It had been sitting in chilled seawater with ice packs and crushed bag ice floating around it like little dead fish. And when my gloves closed around the casing, heat bled into my palms anyway. It made my stomach do that stupid elevator drop like I'd missed a step on a ladder. It wasn't supposed to feel like anything. It was a damn recorder from a plane that hit the water before I even had a driver's license. The contract said historic recovery. The press packet said closure for families. The guy in the windbreaker with a military haircut kept calling it cleanup, like he was talking about litter on a beach. I called it a paycheck because rent doesn't give shit about my morals. I'm the person you hire when you don't want a uniformed investigator on camera. When you want the ugly part handled by somebody you can pretend doesn't exist. I do avionics salvage and extraction, corrosion control, chip off if I have to. I rebuild broken power rails with a microscope and a steady hand, scrape all crust off board with a toothbrush, and I hand over whatever screams are still trapped inside. This one shouldn't have screamed at all. We only found it because a coastal listening station started receiving fresh pings that matched an old flight number. Not the usual emergency locator beep beep chirp that goes off when something hits water. Not a distress beacon bouncing around on battery fumes. Actual encoded versts. Tight timing. Clean structure. The kind of thing you see when somebody's maintaining a transmitter, not when it's been marinating in deep water for decades. The station tech did what they're supposed to do. Logged it, flagged it, forwarded it. Somewhere up the chain, someone in government got nervous because within a week a recovery ship was paid for like money wasn't real and my phone was lighting up with urgent and classified and you will be on a boat by Friday. I should have asked more questions, but I've been doing this long enough to know how that goes. You ask questions, they find someone else. You don't ask questions, you get paid, and you get to pretend you're not part of whatever dirty little machine is grinding underneath. So I took the gig. The ship they put me on wasn't a cute little research vessel with grad students and Niskin bottles. It was a retrofitted offshore maintenance boat, all steel and bruised paint and a deck built for cranes. It stank like diesel, salt, stale coffee, and that hot metal smell that leaks out of a winch drum after a long pull. The kind of boat that lives in ugly seas and doesn't complain. They'd welded a shipping container on the aft deck and called it my lab. It was my own little box of fluorescent light and tools and privacy, which is a joke on a ship because nobody respects doors. Still, I liked it. A place to do my work without some deckhand breathing beer breath over my shoulder. We steamed out through gray water that looked too normal for what we were doing. Flat chop, gulls cutting lazy circles, the horizon like a pencil line. If you didn't know, you'd think we were heading to a rig for routine maintenance. There was no sense of graveyard about it. That made it worse. The military liaison, Ramsey, that was his name, stayed out of the way until he didn't. He was always there without ever being seen coming. Windbreaker that never got wet. Hands that stayed clean. A face like he'd been carved out of impatience. He had this way of looking at you, like you were a tool he hadn't decided whether to throw away. The crew hated him. They didn't say it out loud because he had that I can ruin your whole life with a phone call vibe, but you could see it in the way they went quiet when he walked by, the way their jokes died in their throats. The deck boss, a thick-armed guy named Madsen with a broken nose and a permanent squint, asked me once on the first night, "He your handler?" I said, "He's my problem." Madsen snorted. "That's everyone's problem." We got to the coordinates at dawn. The sea looked too polite, like it was trying to behave. It was the kind of morning fishermen pray for low swell, dull light, just enough wind to wrinkle the surface. I stood at the rail with my coffee and watched it like it might blink. Below us sat the wreck, a passenger jet that should have been broken and buried in silt by now. I've seen crashes. I've seen how the ocean eats things. Give it a month and the paint chalks. Give it a year and the metal blooms. Give it 10 and the whole thing turns into a reef that nobody recognizes as human-made unless you know what you're looking at. This one looked staged. The sonar technician brought up a plot that looked wrong. Not weird blob wrong. Wrong like the shape had edges. Like it had been placed there. Mostly intact fuselage. Nose down, tail twisted, wings half sunk. But the overall tube was still a tube. The way the return came back was clean, too. Like the aluminum skin wasn't as eaten as it should be. Ramsey stood behind the sonar screen with his arms folded, watching like he was waiting for someone to say the word he wanted to hear. Madsen said, "ROV first." They dropped the ROV into the water with the crane and a splash that sounded like someone slapping a wet tarp. The camera feed came up on the ship's monitors, greenish, grainy, the kind of video that makes everything look like a dream you had while sick. Light cones cut through dark water. Fish flickered past, silver darts, then vanished. Silt rolled in lazy curtains. Then the plane appeared out of the murk like a wall. It didn't drift into view like a wreck usually does. It was just there, a sudden shape, a huge dark hulk that made everyone in the control room suck in air at the same time. The windows were there, rows and rows, some still had glass. That's what got me first. Glass doesn't survive. Glass spiderwebs, then pops, then you've got empty frames and little teeth of it left behind. But here, there were panes, whole panes, and a pilot's side window. The pilot's side window reflected the ROV's lights in a clean line like it had been polished yesterday. I leaned closer, bracing on the console. I thought it was an illusion, just light and water doing their thing. But then the camera drifted and the reflection stayed sharp. Like the surface of the glass knew how to behave. And then I saw something on it. Handprints, not coral patterns, not algae. 5-finger smears, greasy like someone inside had pressed their hands flat and slid them down. Madsen laughed once. That nervous bark people do when their brain wants to file something away as a joke, because the alternative is admitting you're scared. "Spooky," he said. The ROV operator didn't laugh. He just adjusted thrusters with stiff fingers. Ramsey didn't laugh either. He leaned in, eyes narrowed, and said, "Keep away from the cockpit for now." It came out casual, like a suggestion, but the tone was a command. The operator hesitated, then complied. The ROV drifted along the fuselage instead. The skin had cuts, long, clean slices along rivet lines, like somebody had opened the plane with a can opener. The metal edges weren't jagged. They weren't torn and frayed like a crash. They looked pinched and folded, like the aluminum had softened and been pressed shut again. It made my teeth ache. I can't explain that part better. It was like watching someone bend bone. The ROV passed over a section where the cut seam had been closed, and you could see a faint ridge like scar tissue. "What the hell did that?" Madsen muttered. Ramsey didn't answer. He was watching the screen like he was reading. When the ROV reached the belly, its light hit the flight data recorder housing bolted near the rear. You could still make out the mount, the protective casing, the bracket absurdly intact. Ramsey finally nodded. "Get it." The manipulator claw grabbed the box. It took a hard pull, bolts squealing through the water, a sound that came through the ROV mic like an animal crying. Then it popped free. The moment it did, a cloud came off it. Not rust, not silt, clear mucus, thick as egg whites, drifting in ropes that clung to the ROV arm like spit. Somebody in the control room gagged. You could hear it over the open mic. A wet wretch they tried to swallow back. The operator cursed softly and kept the camera steady because that's what professionals do when something gross and wrong is happening. They keep the shot framed. The box went into the recovery basket. They hauled it up with the crane like it was a shark. When it broke the surface, it didn't drip like normal wet metal. It shed strings, long, clear strings that stretched and snapped, flinging little beads across the deck that glimmered and didn't evaporate. Madsen yelled for the evidence tub. Someone dragged it over. They dropped the box in and poured chilled seawater over it like they were baptizing something they didn't want to touch. It sat there like a brick that didn't belong to the ocean. Ramsey watched it the whole time, jaw tight. When a deckhand raised his phone like he might take a picture, Ramsey's voice cut across the deck like a whip. "Put it away." The deckhand did. They carried the tub into my container lab, sloshing seawater, and set on my workbench. My bench was bolted to the container floor, but the ship still made everything shimmy. Tools clicked. A screwdriver rolled until I stopped it with my elbow. I did my ritual. I always do. It's like superstition, but it's also discipline. I laid out towels. I set on my laptop. Isolation transformer. Power supply. Gloves. Tweezers. A clean tray. A jar of isopropyl. A little brush. Outside, the ship creaked. The hull spoke in low groans. A wave slapped the side with that hollow whump like someone hitting a drum. Footsteps on deck. Somebody laughing too loud. Smoke smell from astern where the crew liked to hide and pretend they weren't trapped on a steel box in the middle of nowhere. I reached into the tub. The box was warm. Not mildly. Not. Maybe my hands are cold warm. Warm like a heartbeat. I lifted it out, brine dripping off, and I could feel heat pushing through my gloves. It made my wrists prickle. I wiped slime off the casing. It smeared. It didn't dry. It stayed glossy like it wanted to be handled. I unscrewed the backplate and expected corrosion, salt, rot. The inside looked wet. Not flooded. Not shorted. More like a mouth. Thin filaments coated the circuit board, translucent strands that held their shape when I touched them with tweezers. They flexed and then settled back into place like they had tension. I told myself biofilm, ocean bacteria, some kind of marine gunk. Normal gross. Then the filaments twitched toward the heat of my glove. Not drifting, not floating, reaching. I snapped the backplate back on so fast, I stripped one of the screws. My heart was banging stupid in my chest, and I hated myself for it. I've pulled dead things out of burnt wreckage. I've handled evidence bags that felt like they still had body heat. I'm not squeamish, but this wasn't squeamish. This was my brain screaming that something was moving wrong. I backed away like I was dealing with a live wire. The container door banged open behind me without a knock. I didn't have to turn to know it was Ramsey. Nobody else on the boat moved like that, like doors were a suggestion. He stepped in, eyes scanning my bench, my tub, the clothes box. He smelled like coffee and cheap cologne and entitlement. He asked, "Can you pull audio tonight?" I stared at him for a second, actually speechless because my mind was still stuck on filaments reaching for heat. I said, "Why the hell is it warm?" He didn't blink. "Do your job." I said, "This isn't right." Ramsey moved closer. The container was small. He filled it. He leaned in close enough that I could see the pores on his nose and the tiny, broken capillaries at the edge of his nostrils from too many cold mornings. "It's right enough," he said. "Extract the data. No copies. No outside comms. You don't talk to the crew. You don't talk to press. You give it to me." The part that made me angry wasn't the order. I've dealt with secrecy. It was the way he said it, like I wasn't a person. Like he was talking to a wrench. I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind him I wasn't enlisted. I wanted to say fuck you because it would have felt good. Instead, I nodded because I'm not brave. I am practiced. And I'd seen the way the crew deferred to him. The way even the captain swallowed when Ramsey spoke. Ramsey watched me nod like he was watching a dog sit on command. Then he left, and the door banged shut behind him. The ship rolled. The tub water sloshed. The box sat on my bench like a black tooth. I told myself to stop being dramatic. I rigged the interface. These older recorders use solid-state memory, multiple modules, redundant. You can usually pull something even if it's fragmented. I connected power. I watched my meters. Voltage stabilized cleanly, too cleanly, like it wasn't dragging under load the way a corroded board should. I rested my gloved hand on the casing to steady it. The box pulsed. Not vibration from a ship. Not the hum of the generator. A subtle push against my palm, like a heartbeat. I froze. Held my breath. It pulsed again. My throat went tight. My mouth tasted like pennies. I clicked read. The file directory populated instantly. Too instantly. Names. Timestamps. Clean structure. Like someone had maintained it. Like it had been plugged in yesterday. Not pulled from a deep water grave. My eyes snagged on the most recent recording. Dated today. I stared at it until the letters swam. This was a passenger jet that went down years ago. People cried on the news. Flowers, lawsuits, documentaries, closure. And yet here was a file dated today. I hover my cursor. My hand was shaking just a little, and that pissed me off. I clenched my jaw and clicked anyway, because curiosity is a knife you turn on yourself, and I've never been good at putting knives down. Audio came through my headphones. Cabin hum, engine whine, faint voices. Normal cockpit ambience. Then a man coughed. Not a 1980s radio crackle cough. Not a distorted archival sound. A clean, close cough like he was in a room with me. Then a voice said, sharp, annoyed, "Stop leaning on my fucking console." It was me. My voice. My exact tone. The way I say fucking when I'm trying to sound casual, but I'm irritated. I yanked the headphones off so fast the cable snapped the side of my laptop. The audio kept playing through the speaker for half a second before I slapped the mute. That half second felt like the ship had suddenly gone silent just to listen. Outside the container, footsteps moved. Someone laughed. A wave slapped the hull. Everything normal, except my own voice had just come out of a box pulled from a dead plane. I replayed it with the speakers off, waveform only, because part of me wanted to prove to myself it wasn't real. I scrubbed forward slow. Speech bursts exactly where I remembered talking earlier on deck. Not my whole day, just scraps. A swear, a laugh, me telling a deckhand to move a crate. My voice echoing the way it does when the wind's hitting hard and you're talking past an engine. How the hell would a cockpit recorder have my deck audio? Unless it wasn't recording the cockpit anymore. Unless it was recording the ship. I opened another file. Same date, different label. This one started with silence, then a wet sound like someone licking their lips. Then Ramsey's voice close clipped. "You don't copy anything." Then my voice quieter. "It's warm." And then a third voice layered in. It didn't sound human. It sounded like a person trying to speak through water and metal at the same time, like you'd stuffed a mouth full of brine and wires and told it to form words anyway. It said, clearly, "Bring the other one." I paused it and stared at the screen until my eyes watered. The other one. The flight data recorder wasn't the only box. There was a cockpit voice recorder still on the plane, probably bolted into the ceiling area above the cockpit like they usually are. Ramsey wanted both. I stepped out of the container with my heart still punching my ribs and went straight to the deck, because if I stayed in that lab with the warm black tooth, I was going to lose my mind. The air hit me hard. Cold, salty, wet. The ship was rolling a little more now. Not bad, but enough to make the crane cable sway. The horizon was a gray smear, the kind of weather that drains color out of your eyes. I found Ramsey near the dive station with the supervisor. They were gearing up a saturation diver for a short bottom time, just long enough to cut the CVR loose and attach a lift line. The dive supervisor, Ortega, was a hard woman with a voice like gravel and a clipboard that might as well have been a weapon. She ran her people tight. I respected that. The ocean doesn't care how macho you feel. The ocean respects procedure. The diver was Collins. Thick neck, shave head, the kind of guy who thinks fear is a weakness you can punch. He was already pissed about being woken up for an extra run. You could see in the way he slammed his gloves on, in the way his jaw worked like he was chewing anger. He saw me and rolled his eyes like I was a mosquito. I grabbed Ramsey's sleeve. He looked down at my hand like it offended him. I said, "Lo, we should stop. The recorder's got files dated today. It has my voice on it." Ramsey didn't even blink. He looked past me like I was a smudge on glass. "You're tired." "I'm not." "Ortega," he said over my shoulder. "Get him down there." "Now." Ortega's eyes flicked to me, then back to Ramsey. I could tell she didn't like him, but she liked her paycheck and her clearance more. She snapped at Collins, "Suit up faster." Collins leaned toward me, mouthpiece dangling, and said, "You always this dramatic? Or is that a special skill?" "Listen to me," I said. "The damn thing." He cut me off with a laugh that wasn't funny. "It's a box. You're scared of a box." Ramsey stepped closer and his voice went flat. Get out of the way. There are moments when you can feel your life branch. Like if you do one thing, everything changes. If you don't, you stay in the same rut and you get to blame everyone else later. I should have grabbed Collins by the harness. I should have made a scene. I should have demanded Ortega shut it down. I should have done a lot of brave things. Instead, I moved because everyone around me was moving and the ship has its own gravity. The crew swung the bell into position. The crane cable tightened. Collins climbed into the dive bell like a guy stepping into an elevator. Ortega slapped the hatch closed. The bell dropped. It went down into water that looked like oil from the surface. The cable paid out with that steady whine that makes your teeth vibrate. The comms crackled as Collins checked in. Bell clear. Copy. Bell clear, Ortega said, voice calm like she was ordering lunch. I ended up in the control room because I didn't know where else to put my body. The ROV operator was there, eyes glued to screens. The sonar tech was there, fingers tapping. Madsen stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Ramsey took a seat behind the consoles like he owned a room. Collins' helmet cam came up, shaky at first, then stabilizing as he descended. Depth callouts, gas checks, umbilical slack, everything procedural. The wreck appeared again, looming like a building. Collins' light swept over the cuts in the fuselage, over the intact windows. Even through the camera, I could feel the wrongness of that polished glass. Collins' breathing changed. Not panic, not exertion, like his throat tightened. He said, "That's wrong." Ortega's pen paused on her clipboard. "Collins, clarify." Collins didn't answer right away. The line went quiet except for his breathing and the faint hiss of the system. Then, like he was talking to himself, he said, "There's light." No one had lights on inside the wreck. Not supposed to. The plane should have been black as a coffin. Ortega snapped, "Focus on task. CVR is cockpit ceiling. Stay on your marks." Collins swam along the fuselage toward the cockpit cuts. His light hit the cockpit window. For a second, the glass reflected his lamp in that perfect, clean line again. Then the reflection flickered, like something on the other side moved. Collins shoved closer. His breath hammered now, fast and tight. He raised his cutter to the window seam where the metal had been peeled and pressed shut again. Something pressed back from inside. A palm. Flat. White. Fingers too long. Joints wrong. It pressed hard enough to bow the glass slightly. Collins swore loud and tried to kick back. The palm slid away and the cockpit window went black again. Then Collins' comms popped with a new sound. Not radio. Not feedback. A cabin chime. That little ding you hear when a seatbelt sign flips. It came through the underwater mic, faint but unmistakable, like the ocean itself had learned airline etiquette. Ortega's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" Madsen muttered, "No fucking way." Collins said, "Breathy, yeah." Then quieter, "It's not in my head." His camera tilted down. The cut seam in the fuselage opened. Not like metal tearing, not like a door swinging. It unfolded. Slow, deliberate, like soft aluminum being unzipped by invisible hands. A thin ribbon of clear mucus spilled out, the same slime we found on the first box, and it flowed down toward Collins' gloves. Collins jerked his hands away like he'd touched a jellyfish. He kicked back hard. The mucus moved anyway, drifting toward him in a purposeful rope. Not random current. It wanted. He swung his cutter at it, furious, and the blade passed through it like it was water. Then the rope touched his suit sleeve and flattened into a film. It clung. Collins cursed so hard Ortega had to bark, language out of habit like it mattered. Collins grabbed at his sleeve, yanking. The film held. It started crawling up his arm toward the seam of his wrist seal like it was looking for a way inside. Ortega's voice went sharp. "Abort. Now. Collins, abort." Collins didn't argue. He kicked hard and started for the bell. He made it maybe 10 meters before he stopped dead. His whole body went rigid mid-water. His hands drifted forward toward the wreck like he was reaching. Ortega shouted his name again and again. Collins didn't respond. Then Collins' voice came through, calm and flat, like somebody else had borrowed his throat. Bring the other one. The control room went dead silent. Ramsey leaned forward in his chair like he'd been waiting to hear that. Madsen turned and looked at Ramsey like he wanted to hit him. Ortega didn't waste time. Winch him. Now. Full retrieval. They hauled Collins up on the umbilical like a hooked fish. The bell breached. Water cascaded off in sheets. The crew swarmed. Ortega slapped the hatch dogs loose and pulled the hatch open. Collins didn't climb out. He sat inside, staring past everyone. His lips moved without sound. The medic, young guy named Sue with scared eyes and steady hands, grabbed Collins by the harness and pulled. Collins came out stiff, heavy like he'd gained weight, like his suit had filled with something. They peeled his helmet off. His face looked swollen, not from pressure, from fluid. His lips were pale and puffy. A thin line of clear gel leaked from the corner of his mouth and stretched before snapping. His eyes tracked Ramsey. Collins tried to speak. He coughed, and a wad of clear mucus came up, and it sat tiny dark flecks like ground pepper. Sue wiped it with gauze, and the gauze stuck to Collins' skin like glue. Collins smiled. Not a normal smile. A tight, satisfied pull, like a person hearing good news. Maj Singh whispered, Jesus. Ramsey stepped in, voice cold. Stop filming. A deckhand with a GoPro on his helmet froze like a kid caught stealing. Ramsey pointed. Now. The deckhand ripped it off and shoved it in a pocket. Ramsey told Sue, keep him stable. Sue opened his mouth like he might say something about medical protocol, then caught Ramsey's look and shut it again. He nodded and hauled Collins toward the medic bay with 2 crewmen helping. Collins' feet dragged. His body didn't cooperate, but he kept smiling. Ramsey turned on his heel and came straight for my container lab. I followed because I didn't want him alone with my equipment, and I didn't want to be alone with what was happening on this ship. He slammed the container door behind him hard enough to rattle my tools. He pointed at the warm black box in the tub. Hand it over. I said no. My voice cracked. I hated that it cracked. It made me sound like a kid arguing with a teacher. Ramsey took a step closer. You're not in charge of this. I said, it's recording us. It's not dead. It's not even a recorder. He reached toward my laptop like he was going to slam it shut or smash it. I grabbed the box first. It was heavier now. Not physically heavier, not in a way you could measure. It felt reluctant, like something inside pressed back against my palms. Like the box didn't want to leave the bench. The casing was slick with slime. My gloves squeaked against it. Ramsey grabbed for it, and his bare fingers touched the casing. He flinched like he'd been burned. His eyes widened a fraction. His jaw tightened. He yanked his hand back and stared at his fingertips. A faint gray film coated them, like wet ash. He wiped it on his pants, furious, and his fingers left streaks that looked like oil. I shoved the box against my chest and stepped back. He lunged. I pivoted and slammed the box down onto the deck edge inside the container. Not gently. I wanted to hurt it. I wanted to prove it was an object. The casing dented slightly, and a crack opened along a seam. Clear gel seeped out like sap. In the gel, something moved. Tiny filaments, hair thin, writhing toward the air like worms smelling rain. The smell hit next. Not rot, not fish, not sulfur. Clean, cold, like saline and metal and a hospital hallway at 3 a.m. where the lights buzz and nobody smiles. Ramsey froze, staring at the crack like he'd just seen his own organs on the outside. Then he did what people like him always do when reality stops obeying them. He tried to make it someone else's problem. He wrapped his jacket sleeve around his hand and grabbed the box like he was picking up dog shit. He shoved it toward me. Seal it. Now. I didn't take it. I backed up until my spine hit the container wall. The filaments extended, sensing heat. They reached toward Ramsey's wrist where his sleeve gaped. Ramsey saw it, and his face finally broke. Not pure fear. Rage plus fear. The combo that makes men do stupid, cruel things. He kicked the evidence tub over. Chilled seawater dumped across the container floor, washing over my boots. The box slid in it, gel thinning and spreading like a living stain. The filaments didn't slow in water. They accelerated. They flattened and streamed outward, searching. One brushed my boot. The contact felt like ice and needles at once. My calf muscle clenched, so hard cramped. I jerked away and slammed my heel against the deck, tried to wipe it off. The filament held for a second, then peeled away and drifted back toward the box like it had collected what it wanted. Ramsey shouted for crew to get in here. Nobody came. The whole ship had gone weirdly quiet, like everyone outside had decided not to notice the screaming from inside a metal box. I grabbed the black box with both hands, ignoring the slick, ignoring the needle burn, and bolted out onto the open deck. Wind at my face. Salt spray. The ship rolled under my feet. Crew turned and stared like I'd come out holding a bomb. Maybe I had. Colin sat on a bench near the dive station, wrapped in a foil blanket, still smiling that tight smile. His eyes followed the box like he recognized it. Like a dog tracking a treat. Ramsey burst out behind me, shouting something about evidence, property, court-martial, words like he could lasso the ocean with paperwork. Madsen stepped between Ramsey and me without thinking, shoulders squared. "Back off," he growled. Ramsey snapped, "Move." Madsen didn't. Ramsey tried to push past, and Madsen shoved him back hard enough that Ramsey stumbled. For half a second, I thought Ramsey was going to swing, and if he did, Madsen would have folded him like laundry. But Ramsey checked himself. He straightened his windbreaker and looked at Madsen like he'd just marked his name on a list. I didn't wait. I ran to the rail. The sea below looked innocent. Gray, rippled, the kind of water you could stare at all day and forget it's deep enough to crush steel. My hands were shaking so hard the box rattled against the railing. Ramsey shouted, "Don't." I heaved it overboard. It hit the water with a dull splash and vanished. For one beautiful second, I felt relief so strong it almost made me laugh. Then the sea bulged where it fell. Not a normal splash, not a ripple. A push from below, like something under the surface caught it before it could sink. A clean circle formed on the water, smooth as glass, like the sea had gone calm in a perfect ring. It didn't reflect the sky right. It reflected darkness. Like the ocean opened an eyelid. The circle tightened, and the ship lurched slightly toward it like a magnet had grabbed our hull. Crew grabbed railings. Someone yelled. The crane cable sang as it shifted tension. I dug my fingers into the steel rail until my knuckles screamed. From below, through the deck plates, a faint ding sounded. Seatbelt sign, cabin chime, then a second sound, a low steady whine, like engines spooling up. Not our engines, different pitch, higher, like turbine whine filtered through water and steel. Ortega squad, bridge, power, power now. The captain didn't need to be told twice. The ship's engines roared. Vibration surged up through the deck like an animal waking. The boat pulled away from the circle like dragging a stubborn anchor. The smooth circle followed for a few seconds, keeping pace under the surface, not chasing like a wave, staying with us. Then it flattened and disappeared as if it had never existed. The sea went back to normal chop, gulls still circling like nothing happened. That's what fucked with me the most. The way the ocean could do something impossible and then go right back to looking like a postcard. Ramsey came up beside me, breathing hard, face blotchy. He didn't thank me. He didn't apologize. He leaned close and hissed, "If you talk, I ruin you." I laughed in his face, because what else do you do when a man threatens your career after the ocean tries to swallow your ship? "You're gonna ruin me?" I said. "Did you miss the part where the water just—" "Shut up," he snapped, eyes wild for the first time. "Shut the fuck up." Madsen grabbed Ramsey's shoulder hard. "Go back to your hole," he said, "before you get hurt." Ramsey shook him off like he'd been touched by something dirty and stalked away toward the bridge. The crew didn't cheer. Nobody made jokes. They just went quiet and busy because that's how sailors survive. You focus on tasks so you don't have to look at the thing under the surface. They told me to stay out of the way. I did. I went back to my container, boots squelching in seawater, and I scrubbed my hands until my skin burned even though I'd been wearing gloves. I kept feeling that filament brush my boot, kept feeling the ice needle sensation in my calf. 2 hours later, Collins convulsed in the medic bay and died. Not dramatic, not screaming. His body just locked, then softened like a puppet whose strings got cut. Sue called for help. Ortega ran down. Matson went pale. They cut Collins' suit open, looking for an embolism or a ruptured vessel or anything that would make sense. Clear gel poured out from under his wrist seal like someone had injected him with aquarium slime. It wasn't watery. It held shape. It slid in thick ropes across the deck, clinging to gloves and tools. The smell was that clean hospital saline again, mixed with blood and sweat. Inside the gel were tiny dark flecks. Black, rectangular flecks. Little bits of plastic and circuit board. Like something inside him had started building a recorder. Sue gagged and turned his head. Ortega's hands shook for the first time I'd seen. Matson backed away like the gel might jump. Ramsey showed up like he'd been summoned by the word dead. He took one look at the gel, at the flecks, and his face did something ugly. Relief and anger tangled together. Like this was bad, but it also proved something he already believed. He ordered Collins' body dumped into the ship's storage freezer until we get back. Like Collins was meat. Ortega snapped. He's a person. Ramsey's eyes cut to her. Not anymore. Ortega looked like she might spit in his face. Then she looked at the crew watching and she swallowed her rage because she was responsible for them, and picking a fight with Ramsey wasn't going to keep anyone breathing. They wrapped Collins in a bag and hauled him down to the freezer. Ramsey stood there and watched the door shut like he was making sure a lid was closed properly. That night, the sea got rougher. Not storm rough, just restless. The kind of rolling swell that turns your stomach even if you've been on boats your whole life. The ship creaked and moaned. Pipes gurgled. Somewhere inside the hull, water sloshed in a tank like a giant, slowly stirring soup. I lay in my bunk with my clothes still on, boots by the door, because taking them off felt like surrender. I couldn't stop tasting metal, like I've been sucking on coins. My phone had no service. The ship's Wi-Fi didn't reach my cabin. Still, at 3:07 a.m., my laptop on the little fold-out desk powered on by itself. The screen lit up the cabin in a cold rectangle. I sat up so fast I cracked my knee on the bunk frame. For a second, I thought maybe we'd gotten within range of shore and the thing had auto-woken. But the Wi-Fi icon was dead. No signal. Battery was half drained. A single audio file sat on the desktop. No drive connected. No network. Just a file. CVR today, final.wave. My throat closed. I stared at it, so long my eyes watered, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The ship rolled. The overhead light fixture creaked. Outside my cabin wall, something in the corridor clinked softly like a tool shifting. I told myself not to click it. I told myself to be smart, to wake someone, to go to Ortega, to shove the laptop in a locker, to do anything except play the thing. My finger moved anyway. I clicked. At first, it was just the normal cockpit bed noise, fans, a steady electrical hiss, that half-musical turbine whine you only notice when it stops. It sounded too clean for anything that old. Like it wasn't coming off some corroded memory chip. Like it was happening live. Then I heard my breathing. Not the mic picking up some archive panic. My actual breathing, the wet little crackle you get when you're trying not to make noise. I stopped inhaling just to test it. The breathing on the file stopped too, like it had its ear pressed to my chest. My skin went cold. A soft knock rolled through the recording, 3 taps like someone rapping on a bulkhead from the outside. The same 3 taps came through my cabin wall a split second later. I stared at the metal like it had a face. The file kept playing. A distant ding. Not loud, not dramatic. Just that polite airline chime. Then Ramsey's voice, close and bored. You don't copy anything. I hadn't heard him say that in my cabin. Not tonight. Not at 3:07 a.m. My voice answered, low and tired. It's warm. I hadn't said that either. Not tonight. Not in this room. The file wasn't a recording anymore. It was a script running ahead of me, daring me to follow. I slammed the laptop lid so hard it hurt my hand. The screen went dark. The cabin didn't get quieter. The ship still hummed through the mattress. Water slapped the hull in lazy, patient hits. And under that, I still heard the turbine whine. I got out of the bunk and went straight to the sink. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want to see myself yet. I just leaned over the little mirror and opened my mouth. My throat glistened wrong. Not like saliva, like gel, like the back of my throat had been varnished. I gagged and coughed into the basin. A string of clear slime came up and stuck to my lip. It stretched, refused to snap, then finally peeled off with a sick little sound. In it, a thin black shard caught the dim light. Plastic. I sat down hard on the floor with my back against the cabin door. I held my pocket knife in my fist like a stupid kid. My hands shook so bad the blade clicked against the handle. I thought about Collins, about the way he smiled, about the bits of circuit board floating in his fluids like pepper. That filament had brushed my boot back in the container. I told myself it barely touched. It was enough. Whatever was down there didn't need the box. It needed a carrier, a body that could walk around topside, talk, cough, spit, and leak sound back into the world. A recorder that could breathe. I didn't sleep. I listened. Every time the ship creaked, my spine tightened. Every time a pipe gurgled, I waited for it to say words. Once around 4, I heard a faint ding through the deck plates like someone flicking a spoon against glass. I put both hands over my mouth until my jaw hurt. Morning came gray and mean. The sea looked flat again, like it hadn't tried to grab us, like it hadn't watched. I went up to deck early because being alone in that cabin felt like being trapped in a mouth. Crewmen moved slow. Nobody talked about Collins. Nobody talked about the circle. They just did chores, coiled lines, checked latches, smoked, stared at the horizon too long. Ortega stood by the dive station with coffee she wasn't drinking. Her eyes were red like she'd rubbed them raw. Madsen saw me and jerked his chin toward the bridge. Ramsey wants you. Of course he did. I found Ramsey in the little chart room, leaning over a table like he was planning a war. The captain stood a few feet away, silent, hands behind his back. It wasn't his ship anymore. It was Ramsey's. Ramsey didn't look up when I walked in. He said, "You threw away evidence." I said, "I threw away a fucking thing that was trying to crawl into people." He finally looked at me, eyes flat. "We're still going back down." My stomach dropped. "No, the cockpit recorder is still there," he said. "We need it." "You saw what happened," I snapped. It opened the plane like soft meat. It talked through Collins. Ramsey's mouth twitched. Collins was a complication. He was a person. Ramsey shrugged like that word didn't translate. "Your job isn't ethics. Your job is extraction." I felt the gel in my throat shift when I swallowed. I tasted metal again. "You can't send another diver," I said. "You'll kill them." Ramsey leaned closer. "We're not sending another diver." He glanced at the captain. The captain's jaw clenched. I got it before he said it, and it made me cold all over. He was sending the ROV. Not to look, not to cut, to deliver. "Bring the other one," I whispered, and the sound of it made my skin crawl because it sounded like Colin's borrowed voice in my head. Ramsey's eyes sharpened. He heard it too. He watched my mouth like he expected it to keep going. He said, "You okay?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to get off this ship and into a shower and pretend last night didn't happen. But I could still feel that file running ahead of me, lining up my words. I said, "Don't go back down." Ramsey smiled without warmth. "We're already here." He sent the captain out. It was just me and him and the sound of chart paper shifting. He said, "Softer. If you've got contamination, tell me now. It saves everyone trouble." I laughed once sharp. Contamination. Like I tracked mud in. Ramsey's eyes didn't move. "Like you're compromised." I wanted to punch him. I wanted to shove him overboard and see if the sea made a circle just for him. Instead, I said, "Why are you doing this?" Ramsey paused like the question bored him. Then he said, "Because someone is going to ask if it's possible. And if we don't answer, someone else will." Better we hold it. Hold what? I snapped. A talking fucking plane? Ramsey's gaze drifted to the porthole. A transmitter. A storage medium. Something that survives depth and time and carries voice. If it can record us, it can record anything. He looked back at me. And if it can record anything, it can carry orders. That's when I understood he wasn't scared the way we were scared. He was scared in a different direction. He was scared of losing control of something that could rewrite rules. I left the chart room before my hands did something stupid. On deck, the crew were already setting up the ROV for another drop. Ortega was arguing with Madsen in low voices, tight and angry. "I'm not babysitting this," Ortega hissed. "We already lost a man." Madsen said, "Ramsey doesn't care." Ortega's eyes flicked to me. "You look like shit." I opened my mouth to answer and tasted saline. My tongue stuck a little to the roof of my mouth. I swallowed hard. "Don't let them drop it," I said. Ortega's face tightened. "You got something to say it loud." I didn't, because I could feel something in my throat, like a little weight, like a seed. I didn't trust my own voice. They launched the ROV anyway. The control room filled up like last time, but the mood was different. Not curiosity, not nerves. A heavy quiet, like everyone had agreed not to react no matter what they saw. Ramsey sat dead center, hands folded, calm as a guy watching a sports game. The ROV sank. The wreck rose out of black water again, windows still too clean. The cockpit glass threw back the ROV's lights like it liked being looked at. The cut seams along the fuselage looked wider today. That scared me more than anything, like something had been working on it overnight. They guided the ROV toward the cockpit. Ramsey said, "Stop. Hold there." The ROV hovered. Its lights stabbed the cockpit window. For a second, nothing. Then the reflection moved. Not fish, not silt. Something inside shifted like a shadow, standing up. A handprint appeared on the inside of the glass, slow, oily, 5 fingers pressing out as if they were testing the surface. Then another handprint beside it. Then another, like passengers lining up in the dark. A ding echoed through the ROV mic. The operator's knuckles went white on the controls. Ramsey said, "Proceed." The ROV's manipulator arm extended toward the cockpit roof seam where the voice recorder should be. The metal opened. It didn't tear. It peeled like a lid being lifted off warm food. A ribbon of clear gel flowed out, thick and deliberate, and wrapped around the ROV arm. The operator swore under his breath. The gel didn't float away. It crawled up the arm toward the camera housing like it wanted the eye. Ramsey leaned forward. "Don't pull back." The operator snapped. "It's on the arm, sir." Ramsey's voice stayed calm. "Keep going." The manipulator reached into the cockpit cavity. For a moment, the camera caught the inside. Rows of seats swallowed in darkness. Overhead bins gaping like mouths. Everything looked too intact, like the plane hadn't hit water at all, like it had been parked. Then the lights flickered. Something flashed white in the cockpit. Faces, pale and close, pressed against the dark. Not clear enough to identify. Just the impression of too many people in too small a space. The operator jerked and the ROV camera swung. The gel tightened. The ROV shuddered as if something grabbed it from inside. The cable on deck twanged with sudden tension. Crew cursed. The winch motor groaned. "Winch, hold," someone shouted. Ortega's voice cut in on comms, sharp. "You're snagged. Back it out now." "Ramsey snap." "No." Ortega said, "That's an order for safety, Ramsey." Ramsey said, "You don't outrank me." Ortega's voice went ice cold. "This is my deck. My people. Back it out." The ROV operator didn't wait for permission. He hit reverse thrust. For half a second it worked. Then the cockpit seam opened wider like it welcomed the machine. The ROV lurched forward. The screen filled with darkness. A wet peel sound came through the mic. And then the audio changed. Not underwater ambience. Not thruster hum. Cabin noise. The soft murmur of voices layered on top of each other like a crowd arguing in a terminal. A baby crying far away. Someone coughing. A flight attendant tone saying something you couldn't make out. A ding. Then the turbine whine rose like something waking up. The control room froze. Even Ramsey's face tightened. The ROV feed flashed for a second, clean, bright like a normal cockpit camera feed, not murky green underwater. The instrument panel glowed. Lights blinked. Everything looked dry. Then the feed snapped back to underwater green, and the ROV went dead. Black screen. No telemetry. No comms. The cable on deck went slack like a cut line. Someone whispered, "It took it." Ramsey stood so fast his chair scraped. Ortega pushed into the control room, face hard. "We're done," she said. "We're leaving." Ramsey rounded on her. "No, we." Ortega stepped closer. "You already got one man killed. You almost got my operator killed. You don't get another." Ramsey's voice rose. "You don't understand what this is." Ortega jabbed a finger at the dead screen. "I understand exactly what it is. It's a fucking predator." Ramsey's eyes flicked to me. I could feel something in my throat pulse like a tiny heartbeat. The same warmth as the box. The same stubborn pressure behind my tonsils. He said, "Check him." Ortega's head snapped toward me. "What?" Ramsey said, "He's been exposed." The first box touched him. I backed up. "No." Ortega's gaze sharpened. She looked at my mouth like she'd suddenly remembered Colin's leaking gel. "Open your mouth," she said. I clamped my jaw shut. Ramsey said, "Hold him." Madsen moved before thinking. He stepped between them and me again. "The hell you will." Ramsey's tone went ugly. "Move, deck boss." Madsen didn't. Ortega looked between them, calculating. This wasn't just a fight. It was mutiny versus clearance. And inside my throat, that little weight shifted like it was getting comfortable. The ship creaked. The sea slapped. Everything waited. I felt a tickle rise, the urge to clear my throat. A reflex. I fought it. Then the ding came up through the deck plates. Faint but perfect, like the ship itself rang. My mouth opened on its own. A tone came out. Not a word. A pure, steady beep, clean and mechanical like a beacon. Ortega's face went white. Madsen stared at me like I'd just grown gills. Ramsey's eyes lit up with something that wasn't fear. Triumph. "See?" he said, almost whispering. "It works." I slapped both hands over my mouth, but the sound had already escaped. It vibrated in my teeth. It felt good in a sick way, like scratching an itch you didn't know you had. Ortega grabbed my wrist. "Me bay." "Now." Ramsey snapped. "No." "Secure him." Ortega snarled, "Go to hell." She yanked me out of the control room and down the corridor toward the medic bay. Madsen followed, cursing, shoulder-checking anyone who got in the way. I tried to fight her grip, but my arms felt heavy. My skin felt damp from the inside. Every breath tasted like brine. In the medic bay, Sue looked up and saw my face and flinched. Ortega barked, "Sedate him." Sue hesitated. "Ortega." "Now." Sue reached for a syringe. My heart hammered. I didn't want sedation. I didn't want anything in my bloodstream while something in my throat was learning to talk. I backed up until my shoulders hit a cabinet. My boots slipped on the deck like there was a thin film of water that shouldn't be there. Ortega said, "Softer, hey. Listen to me. Don't let it use your voice." I tried to nod. A cough rose anyway. I clenched down hard, jaw shaking, but the cough forced up. A rope of clear gel slid out between my fingers. It draped over my knuckles like warm slime and then snapped free, splattering into the sink. In the gel, black flecks, tiny rectangles, bits of something hard. Sue gagged and swore. Ortega went still. From the corridor outside, boots pounded. Ramsey's voice barked orders. Ortega grabbed my shirt collar. "Can you walk?" I nodded, panicked. She shoved me toward the back hatch that led to the exterior deck. "Then go. Right now." Madsen's eyes widened. "Where?" Ortega didn't answer. She just pushed. I stumbled out into wind and spray. The sea slapped the hull like it was impatient. The horizon looked closer than it should. Ortega followed, dragging Madsen. Behind us, Ramsey came out on deck with two security types I hadn't even noticed on the ship before. Dark jackets, hard faces, the kind of guys who don't ask questions. Ramsey pointed at me. "Bring him." Ortega shouted, "Back off." Ramsey didn't slow. "He's evidence now." Madsen roared and stepped forward, fists up. One of the security guys swung something. Madsen went down hard, like his legs got cut out. Ortega lunged to help him and caught a shove that sent her into the rail. Ramsey advanced, eyes locked on me. "Don't make this harder." My throat warmed. The gel inside me pulsed like it wanted out, like it wanted to speak for itself. I backed toward the stern, where the crew kept the emergency raft canisters and the spare lines. The deck tilted under a swell. Water sprayed up and stung my face. Ramsey kept coming. Behind him, the crew watched like they were glued to the steel. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to pick a side between the man with clearance and the thing inside me. I tasted metal. I tasted saline. I tasted that clean hospital smell like it had become flavor. I wanted to scream, but I didn't trust what would come out. Instead, I turned and ran. My boots slipped on wet deck. I grabbed railings, hauled myself forward. The ship groaned. The wind tore at my breath. I hit the stern gate area and saw the small work skiff they use for shore transfers. An ugly little aluminum boat chained to davits. Not meant for open sea, but it floated. It had an outboard. It had fuel. I threw myself at the chain and started yanking at the lock with shaking hands. It wouldn't go. My fingers were slick. The metal was cold. Ramsey's footsteps hammered behind me. "Stop," he shouted. I kept yanking. My throat spasmed. A tone tried to push out. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood just to stop it. The lock finally snapped open. I ripped the chain free. I slapped the release on the davit like I'd watched them do 100 times. The skiff swung out over water. The sea below looked wrong. Not in a big, obvious way. Subtle. The surface smoothed in patches like it was waiting. I didn't have time to think. I climbed in and hit the drop. The skiff slammed into the water hard enough to jar my teeth. Spray soaked me instantly. I fumbled for the starter cord with numb hands. Ramsey leaned over the stern rail above me, screaming, "Come back." I yanked the cord once. Twice. The outboard coughed. A ding vibrated up through the skiff's aluminum like someone tapped a bell beneath me. The motor roared to life. I gunned it, and the skiff lurched away, bouncing over chop. The ship loomed behind like a dark building. I didn't look back for long, because the water ahead started doing that thing again. A clean circle, smooth as glass. It formed under my bow like the sea was offering me a landing pad. The skiff's nose dipped toward it, drawn like a magnet. The motor screamed. The steering went heavy. I fought it, wrenching the tiller. My arms burned. The skiff slid sideways, almost tipping. The circle darkened. Not shadow, depth, like an open eye. The turbine whine rose through the water, so loud, I felt it in my ribs. I swear I could feel pressure change, like the air itself got heavier for a second. My throat opened. A steady beacon tone poured out of me, without permission. It vibrated in my skull. It felt like relief and horror at the same time. The circle responded. A ding, perfectly timed, came up through the hull of the skiff. Then something hit the bottom from below, one heavy thud that made my teeth clack. The skiff jumped. I choked off the tone, biting down until my jaw ached. I didn't see a tentacle. I didn't see a fin. I didn't see anything break the surface. I only felt the water decide. The circle loosened. The pull eased like it had gotten what it wanted. My sound, my compliance, my proof. The skiff drifted free. I kept the motor pinned and ran until the ship was a smear, until my arms shook, until my throat burned like I'd been screaming even though I hadn't. I don't know how long I floated before a coastal patrol picked me up. I don't remember the radio call. I don't remember the questions. I remember a uniformed hand gripping my shoulder and the taste of metal and the way the sky looked too big. They took me to a port clinic. They asked names. They asked what happened. I tried to tell them, and every time I opened my mouth, my throat slicked up and I tasted brine. A nurse leaned close with a pen and asked me to say, I did. A clean, steady tone came out. Her face drained. She dropped the tongue depressor like it burned her. Someone hit an alarm. They restrained me. They called people I never saw. They moved me through hallways that smelled like antiseptic and cold air. At some point, someone shoved a scope down my throat. I gagged and fought and cried like an animal. On the monitor, my throat looked wrong. Not just inflamed, wired. Little black flecks embedded in tissue like seeds. Thin, translucent strands webbing between them, like someone had started laying a circuit inside me. A man in a suit watched the monitor without blinking. He looked at me and said, "You're going to be quiet." I laughed, wet and broken, because I couldn't make myself quiet even if I wanted. I didn't know my voice anymore. They kept me in a room with no windows for a while. Days, weeks. Time got slippery. They fed me soft food. They gave me meds that made my thoughts slow, but they didn't stop the warmth. Sometimes at night, when everything went still, I heard the turbine whine through the building's bones. Sometimes I heard the ding, and sometimes on a little speaker mounted in the corner of my room that they swore was disconnected, I heard my own voice played back to me, scraps of sentences I hadn't spoken yet. I got out the way people like Ramsey always get what they want by deciding they're done with you. One morning the door opened and a different suit stood there and said, "You're being released." I tried to ask why. I tried to ask where Ramsey was. I tried to ask if the ship made it back. A tone came out instead. The suit didn't flinch. He just said, "Don't talk about it." They dumped me in a coastal town with a bus ticket and a bag of my things like I was trash returned to the right bin. I stayed near water after that because I could not. I hated it and I needed it. I took cheap rooms that smelled like mildew. I walked docks at night. I listened to pilings creak and waves slap, and I waited for the sea to answer me. I learned a few things the hard way. If I keep my mouth shut, I can hold it back. Mostly, if I whisper, it gets excited. The gel warms. The tone wants out. If I sing, God help me. If I try to sing, the ding comes faint and happy like something in the distance claps. And if I cough up gel, the black flecks in it look a little bigger every time. I try to cut it out once. I stood in a motel bathroom with a razor and a flashlight and my jaw shaking. I opened my mouth and stuck the blade toward the back of my throat and thought, just slice, just rip, just get it out. The turbine whine surged so loud my ears rang. I dropped the razor into the sink and sobbed like a kid. Because I understood, then it wasn't just in my throat. It was in whatever part of me decides to speak. The last time I saw open ocean, I was standing on a breakwater at night. Cold wind, salt spray, the water below black and endless. I hadn't talked all day. My jaw hurt from clenching. My tongue felt thick. Out on the dark, a smooth circle formed. No boat around it. No storm. Just a patch of sea going still like it was holding its breath. I felt my throat warm. I heard the ding, faint through stone. And without meaning to, I let a single low tone slip out between my teeth. The circle tightened. The turbine whine rose. And for a second, in the black water, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. Rows of windows, like a plane sitting under the surface with its lights on, waiting for the next voice. I clamped my mouth shut until my lips bled. The sea stayed still anyway, like it didn't need me to keep calling, like it had already recorded enough. Ding!